It's this modularity that you have between engines, form factors, and then be able to have people taste different things between a different suite of products that you're starting to have. And that's why it's so unique.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of The Dime. I'm Brian Fields, and with me, as always, is Kellen Finney. And this week, we got a very special guest returning back to the pod, Alex Kwon. Alex, thanks for taking time. How are you doing today?
Great. It's great to see you guys again.
Excited to have you here. Kellen, how are you doing?
Doing well. Grateful for a chance to talk to Alex again. How are you doing, Brian?
Yeah, I'm stoked. We're going to dive into vape. We're going to dive into innovation, and we're going to dive into kind of pushing the envelope forward. And I think my favorite aspect is the challenges that go behind the curtain, right? Everyone's going to see this big, beautiful release and how nice it all looks. But I think before that, there's all these different iterative changes, all these ups and downs, all these lefts or right decides. And I think nobody better here to kind of break it all down for us, Alex. So before we get in, let's talk about Singular, the platform. Can you give us high-level overview, what it is, and why are you excited to bring it to market?
Yeah, appreciate taking the time, guys, right? And this has been kind of, as we always kind of talk about in the past, right? The space is a labor of love for us. We have some history here on this podcast, well, obviously with with Kellen as well. And I think we're always thinking about how to advance the industry forward, advance the technology, but also kind of our service to clients and overall the consumers and access in the market. We're super, I'm going to not try to use any vulgarity here, but we're super excited about the launch of Singular, not for us as a company, but for the industry, right? And the thing that has us most excited about it, it's the first universal vape platform, modular platform, if you will. And its uniqueness comes in a multitude of ways, and how we kind of built up to it is, to your point, right? We talk about different technology stacks, issues in the market that we had seen in the past, always continue to take feedback from clients and then seeing kind of this huge rise of single-use disposables and realizing that's just not a sustainable future, right? In the business in general and as consumers and everything that we've seen. On top of that, right, with all of our experience with oil and extraction from different types of high cannabinoids like distillates and diamonds, as you guys know, the high THC contents. And then you have your more exotic extracts when it comes to a little bit more diversity and complexity around live resins. Obviously, they're all not created equal as well, all the different kinds of that. And then let alone when you get into the rosins, when you still have some fats and waxes in there, and how that, how the stability goes throughout the life of some of these vapor extracts when you're able to heat them and then consume them. We've seen all those different iterative issues, whether they're through a cartridge platform in 510 or through all-in-ones. And what has us super excited about Singular, right, is that we feel like we have a platform that not only gives different choices of form factors, sizes, engines, and the ability for that all to be tuned properly for the type of extract in this sustainable format that also allows brands to be able to continue to hold and have their unique brand identity form factors while starting to get the replenishment of 510 in the way that we view that it can be, right? And so there's a lot of technology that's been packed into it. That's just one part. And we're super excited because I'm sure by the time this launches, you'll see Singular in, I want to say 500 plus doors across 12 to 14 different markets, and with a lot more excellent brands and partnerships coming online. And we're super excited about it because this has been, a multi-year project, and a lot of it kicked off over some of the stuff that we had talked about in the past, right? So super excited to be talking about it, and super excited for the industry to see it. And just know that, again, I think you guys have heard me say it on this pod and sometimes when we go out and talk about it, this is always just the beginning. We're always kind of leveling up. We have a huge pipeline of exciting things and add-ons that continue to come, but we always try to not alienate the past, always learn iteratively, not only from our experiences, but to make sure that it's something that future-proofs and builds on top of each other.
I think one of my favorite aspects of talking to you is that it's always a thoughtful approach, that I understand that every step forward was an understanding of, okay, here's the problems we want to solve, and this is not the end all be all. It's just kind of a stepping stone forward. So let's go back to understanding how you took all those components together to bring out this new platform, because what you've described is really, really unique and really, really difficult to achieve because there's so many different ways to go. So was there a singular challenge you were trying to solve early on, and then after you found feedback from a customer, you're like, okay, this is really important, we want to layer on this, or did it start something completely different?
That's a really good question. I'm trying to go back to the impetus of it, right? What really sparked it. And I think a lot of it comes, Kellen knows this, right? Is that it also comes from like our own passion, right? Like what do I want? Why am I having this problem? It's like, oh man, I'm switching back. Or you hear from other people, right? You could have the best oil in an excellent cartridge, engine, or an all-in-one, but then it doesn't tune right, doesn't go all the way through, or a customer's getting a hot battery and then they're flooding the atomizer and it's popping, right? There's just all these things that kind of happen. And so we've always thought about how do we eliminate user error? How do we make it a lot more accessible? And at the time, right, if I go back, it's really interesting, right? That's when like kind of all-in-ones were starting to take on their big kick. And as you're starting to see it, there's some charts and graphs I know that our team has around like the dominance of 510 forever. And then you're seeing this big influx of all-in-ones. But all-in-ones also, if you really think about it, they're kind of I don't want to call it a dumber battery, but it's a lot more low tech. It's just a single voltage, right? It's just battery attached to it. They're trying to create as lowest cost as possible, granted our space, to have the delivery of that vapor throughout whatever engine that they're running. So I think for us, we've had, we've done a lot in stainless, we've done a lot in ceramic, and as we've developed different composites and stack ups that we utilize in our post list, those are continuing to iterate. I think we're on like 17 or 19 variations of that. And so that's all tested with cannabis. So that's all tested with understanding different nuances. And it's always coming back to, if I can hand it to someone that is a true head, right? Are they going to, oh yeah, this is good. This is vaporizing the way that I want, right? This is how the extract should taste. This is how it should taste when I'm dabbing it, right? This is how it should taste in flower. Like that's a part of kind of the sensory analysis for us. So it's always coming back to this labor of love of like, hey, is this something that I would have in my pocket? Hey, try this, Kellen. Hey, try this, Brian. Be able to flip between that. And that's just kind of from a personal perspective. I think from a tech and solving a problem issue, I think we saw like, look, 510 is great, right? It's the tried and true engines. And it's something that we have, when we first set out in this industry, or at least in this category of business, was solving the safety issues, right? Solving cleanliness around it. There was heavy metals testing back then, right? But people didn't have any idea of how these cartridges were really made, what raw material supply chains actually looked like. So really solving like the reliability of cartridges was kind of the first step of Active back then, right? And then now you're seeing all-in-ones. We knew when we came into all-in-ones that we had come later, quote unquote. I'm using air quotes, right? We had come later because for us, we're like, shit, like if we get to the right customers and the right people and we build this right, it's still not the best usage of these lithium-ion batteries sitting everywhere. So that wasn't like a great feeling for us. So we've had different tech around like removable sleds. How do you take the shell out and do these things? And I'll come back to the idea of that, like, sometimes the right idea at the wrong time is the wrong idea. Pods were around then, man. You guys saw PAX. You've seen Stizzy blow up, right? You've seen Rove do their thing. You've seen some of these other people in closed systems be able to do that, and that's more of a reusable style, right? Back then, I think those pricing around supply chain was a lot more expensive just because of the use of raw materials around that. And I think as you've seen this advent of all-in-ones, you've seen those raw material supply chains mature a little bit more. Now for us, we get to add a lot more tech onto it, right? Smart chips, understanding the ability to do different things with the oil modulation, right? Be able to understand different ways to make sure that the extract is operating the right way. That's let alone taking out all the bells and whistles of screens and video games and all the other crap that you're seeing out there, right? It's great. It's cool, But so when I come back to that, right, the thought process was, okay, how do we solve at some point or another the sustainability issue around single-use batteries? How do we get the tried and true performance out of 510 and the engines that we've ran already for 6-7 years, right? And becoming the most reliable in the space, at least from feedback that we've gotten from the market. and how do we maintain flavor and reliability, what we've become known for, right? And so it was all those kind of little things, but also how do you have beautiful design? How do you have something that's like, hey, it's not just some stick thing that you put on there that you've seen in the past, right? How do you create different form factors? How do you have a uniqueness to it that can kind of allow brands to really own their form factors? A la, for example, what we were able to do with the single-use all-in-one on the brick, right? For Select. That's become a very great success for them. And we have obviously some other all-in-ones through some other large partners as well that's becoming very successful in their regard. So for us, it was about being able to take the future, take all the benefits that we've seen in the past, all the technology we've layered on, even from our batteries, right? You can go from 0.1, you could deal with you could deal with the pulse of turning on and off, you could deal with how the wave, the modulation of how it heats the oil, all these different things that we've done, or even dialing in your wattages. How do we take all that tech and put it into a device in a platform that now also has interchangeability, that has the ability for them to actually switch between different engines and have the ability to have a different form factor, right? So it was kind of taking this idea of taking the reliability and success of 510, but then being able to kind of marry it and bridge it into the success of form factors and ease of use of all-in-ones. And that was really like, okay, but then how do we future-proof this thing? How do we do it so that the technology that's layered onto it is you have to be very thoughtful, because otherwise then you have to redo the whole thing, right? And the other part I think that was really important to us is how do you not alienate the past? And if you'll see in some of the market material and obviously some of the launches, there's a 510 adapter, right? So that's the first. I know I do believe we're the first ones that have ever done that, right? And it's one of those where it's like, oh, you have to release the friction of this change, quote unquote, into a platform. And the fact that you could still buy 510, we're not taking it away, right? You could slap it on there, it's going to work just as good as well, or better with a higher tech battery. And then you get these tuned pods, right, that are going to be able to go depending on the engine, and let alone the capacity sizes that you're going to. We all know hemp has gone to 3, 4, 5 mil. You could do that too. We've seen cannabis go from, 0.5 mil to 1 to 2, and then dare I say some people are going to 3, but a lot of us that know the oil side of it, depending on the type of extract, like, is that going to be feasible and applicable all the way throughout the life of the cart? We'll see, right? We'll see how stable some people's oil get and where they're at. But what I will say is our platform, depending on the technology or engine or battery structure that you're in, it's going to be the best suited to be able to understand how to be able to handle that at different rates throughout the different life of the capacity of the device. And so that was a long-winded way of saying kind of how we've gotten there in a little ways, right? But it is the idea of the right idea at the wrong time. I think right now you're starting to see there's going to be a big issue when it comes to some of the sustainability aspects of single-use all-in-ones. And I think that this is a great solution that allows people to still have what we believe is the draw or the excitement and trend over an all-in-one, right? It's sleek. It can be, it's a little bit more discreet, has different form factors from palm or like ergonomic feel or how it sits on your lips or how it's dragging on it. And then you're going to have the reusability, right? But you're also going to be able to collab stuff, right? There's going to be a lot of cool things that can come down the road. And all the tech that's been kind of embedded into the system there's a lot cooler stuff that we've kind of layered on for what's coming. And you'll see that in Q1 and Q2, Q3 of next year that's going to layer on.
How much inspiration have you drawn from like the tobacco space in terms of like e-juice, right? Because if you look at that space in my mind, right, like 510 cartridges kind of only exist because the previous smoking technology in the e-juice space just wasn't compatible with the product, right? From an oil perspective. Right. So you don't see a lot of these 510 threads in that space at all. Right. It's either a disposable or they go into a modular, I can't remember, it's called a mod where people
they have a huge
coils and it's a hobby. Right. It's a full on hobby, which in my mind, I see that's where the industry is going to kind of diverge to. Right. The convenience of an all in one, or someone's going to want the hobby. They want that temperature control. They're going to have all of that, they want all of that control within their user experience, right? So I agree. I don't think 510 is the future, even though it does have a really strong stance right now. So Is that kind of like, do you look at like the e-cigarette industry or other like smokable spaces to draw inspiration, or do you just kind of like put all that to the side and drive just like with your own vision?
You know, it's a great question. And I think I'm like trying to think, when I always look off camera, I'm like going through this kind of thinking process to answer it. I think it's a mixture of those two things, right? Because let's go back, right? Like, Kellen, kind of think about how e-juice went. Yeah, it went into big mod tanks where you like put e-juice in. Then there was 510, right? And here's the thing about 510. 510 was just readily available. It was just an easier build, right? Reusable. It's that kind of the razor blade model, right? And then you had these batteries that it was so simple. It's this little tubular thing with 2 wires and that was it, right? So these batteries were everywhere and it had a universal connector. And because they were everywhere, right? It was saturation. It was everywhere. That's why it made sense. It was access, right? That was the reason why I think you saw some 510. And for cannabis, it was different, right? Because of the oil type. And I think we've talked about this before, Kellen, is that like, e-juice is a very easy viscosity to deal with.
Yeah, so
right? It's not like this complex chemical formula, right? They put some e-juice into PG, VG, and voila, away you go, right? You got clouds for days, right? And then they started putting them in cotton bats, right? And then they have like a little mesh coil that sits in there, and that's 99% of single-use disposable e-juice rigs that you're seeing. And then as the bans and some of the crackdowns that have happened on a lot of that stuff because they don't have PMTA or some of the regulatory thing, then you're seeing some of these other ways that they're trying to uniquely get into the space, right? So I think we always stay aware of what e-juice has done. For example, we saw screens 3-4 years ago, and we're like, is people really gonna want that? And then now like everyone wants a screen, which is kind of silly, right? Because you're just like, the cannabis purist side of us is like, well, that doesn't bring us a lot of value. Or like, what's the use case of what we would utilize it for when we're in such a capital constrained space and people are always looking to compete in the margin of what they're doing? It's like, are they going to pay for the extra dollars for screens and all these bells and whistles on it? The oil's got to work in it, right? That's kind of this thing. And so I think it's this marriage of understanding what consumers want, how they're trained from being on e-rigs versus how cannabis users are accustomed to what they're seeing in the space. So to answer your question, I think we don't draw inspiration for it. We're not paying attention to the trends, the technology, the updates and raw material supply, because tobacco's got such a bigger volume. They can mature supply chains a lot faster. That's an area that's very important for us to stay attuned to, right? Because those things inform our component builds, right? They inform the way what type of batteries, whether they're different styles from lithium ion to nickel base, or you go into capacitor style. Like there's so many different technologies coming out of that like little subsector. And then you have different thermoplastics, right? There's certain thermoplastics that just nicotine's not going to use. We're going to use them because they're just different for us. But now you're in a very different supply chain because we're not doing, hundreds of millions of units that e-cig does. Right? Cannabis doesn't do it like that. So you have to kind of know where the bridge is, if that makes sense. Is this something that is this a difference that makes a difference for cannabis? Or is this a difference that doesn't make a difference? Great. They figured it out. Let's make sure we use that. Let's not reinvent the wheel. This is already mature. Let's utilize some of that and how that, kind of augments into our puzzle pieces. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Ton of sense. I think what it seems like to me is that it's like a culmination of everything from that Active has done, all the experience, all the iterations, all the feedback from the different customers. So how much additional feedback did you get from some of your bigger customers say, hey, like, this is what we're thinking. Here's all the different problems with solve. Is this something you think would be helpful? Because the way you were describing it before with the all-in-ones is you're taking it to the next level, right? You're saying like, we understand this is not a long-term trend. What we want to do is demonstrate to you that here's where we think the future is going. And sometimes that can be challenging with a customer who's saying, hey, we're not sure, Alex. How do we know if it's the right move?
Yeah. So the answer to the question is yes to all of that, right? It is a culmination of all the tech. Because look, we got to execute now what we're always doing for delivering for clients, right? When it comes to supply chain sustainability. I mean, look, we're at the center of the trade issues that you see with the U.S. and overseas, right? So it is something that has to have been navigated. it's been remarkable because we had the foresight 2-3 years ago to have a secondary supply chain and a separate manufacturing in Indonesia. That was such a big deal for us, right? Is that like, and mark our words, right? Is that like, we know all the other players that are claiming or doing those things. And like, we know how much time that actually takes. And the fact that we were able to do that so long ago was why its scale was such an important thing. Knowing that like, hey, in the event that things don't get better, before they get worse, we have to have a solution for all of our clients, right? And so that was one big part. I just tangented there for a second, but that was important for just kind of how we see the space. And on top of that, when we think about it yes, we get feedback from customers, of course, right? That's always what we're talking about. But we take a step back of when I just talked about executing now, you got to be able to see forward and around corners, right? So that was an example of one when it came to manufacturing. Another example was man, I'm not the biggest fan in the past of all the different pod systems that exist and this, that, and the other. Some of them haven't iterated and changed in forever. And some of those ideas were kind of good ideas, and some of them kind of, people are like, well, people don't actually do that, like Bluetooth. I mean, you could go through all the different stuff with the writing on it that happened with PAX and some of these pieces. I don't want to put other companies in my mind. I feel bad that I even just said that, so X that up. Yeah, dude.
It was a cool laser etcher, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a great laser etcher, right? So we've all ran, all of us, if you've been in it for long enough, we've either been a premier partner, we run through it, Kellen knows this, right? We've seen all of these things. And so but again, it also takes kind of the humility to take a step back and kind of be like, okay, what was done well? Even when you got to do a postmortem, even when you do something well or if you do something bad. And I think that's all just in life in general about learning, right? Failing fast, failing forward, being able to learn from your mistakes and learn from your wins, just as important, right? And so I think in this regard, when we talk about feedback, this was something that we're building for ourselves, right? It's like thinking about, we became our own customer too. Whereas as in all right, what does Active want to build for Active? Like that's kind of how we had to take this approach a little bit. And this project, jokingly, we called it Mr. Potato Head 3 years ago because it was this long project. We learned so much about IP from the ITC, right? We learned so much about what e-cig and tobacco and also pharma, all these companies do. And so this was a big part of okay, down the road, where is this thing going? We see this big advent of all-in-ones. Is this really going to be, do we really think this is going to last with regulators and all the news and all this shit? I'm like, I don't know. And so we were like, is the future just going to have to be, our version of what we believe? Again, why we call it the world's first modular vape platform is because nobody had done it modularly. Now, so do you dance around this word pod and doing this, right? Because people are like, oh, it's just another pod system. It's actually not, right? Because if we're any other pod system, it would just be one that's closed, that works with your specific brand, and it's got very limited functionality on some of the things, depending on the pricing that you're going to put together for it, and how much variability you're going to have with different styles of oils. Like certain ones, like even the architecture of their tank, in the way that their center post is built, is just not going to be conducive for all the different type of oil types. Now, would that work for e-juice? Hell yeah, Kellen. It'll work for e-juice, right? Will it work for distillate? Sure. But how are you going to work with some really fluid live resin that's super terpy? How are you going to run with some of these different resins? Or dare I say people start mixing that stuff, right? There's going to be different iterations as the great hash makers and extractors start doing a little bit more creativity of obviously always innovating different flavors and experiences, minor cannabinoids within majors. There's going to be a lot more of that, right? Because I think from that nerd side of us, we see that as well as different formulations kind of continue to develop and different strain types, all that, all the genetics and all the things that continue to evolve. So it's like being able to have the vessel, right, for clients and or extractors to be able to say, shit, this is the way that I would want it to go out. And this is the type of heating profile with the type of engine that's saturating the oil that I want to come out of it, right? But then you're limited to, back to the point of an all-in-one. So it's this modularity that you have between engines, form factors, and then be able to have people taste different things between a different suite of products that you're starting to have. And that's why it's so unique. And you can have it designed when you work with our team about it all fitting within a family of design, which is super important because you could take one and you could put it on someone else's design and it's going to look fugly. it's not going to look right. It'll work maybe, but it ain't going to look right. And so this is some of the important pieces of like, how does that work? Does that, and it is going to take a little bit of different conversation, right? Instead of being a closed, it's more open. That's what we've always believed. We're not trying to say, hey, we're the brand, right? Hey, we're the brand. We're the brand that's going to be putting the platform out there. No, you are still the brand. We're still the guy behind it, right? It's more of like, how do I say it? It's analogous to singular compatible, right? So USB-C compatible. That's a better analog for it, right? Because I think what we've seen is when we wanted to create something that we thought was going to be, where is there something there's more options, there's more doors to open? Because we've seen that in our space, whether it's through regulation, oil types, access to material, oil types and extraction, or hardware, right? Those are the things that have closed access for consumers to have like the cleanest and best forms of cannabis through at least this modality of delivery system, which is vape. So for us, it's like as more of those things open up, at the end of the day, that's what consumers want, right? They want more choice and they want access, dude. They want good access. And for us, that's such a big part of how we manufacture. Who are we enabling on the platform? How is it unique for how they're going to get it? How are they replenishing better for their consumers and delivering for them? Whether it's in a experiential form of how that form factor is working in the oil type, or shit, as more access is available because it's cheaper replenishment for them. Or they could run a flight. They could do a lot of these other things that they hadn't been able to do in the past because 510 was just a little bit more clunky, right? And it's not as much brandability around it. It's great. Don't get me wrong. I'm still a part of the 510 Club. I love that, right? And so it's how can we take that tried and true methodology and then now be able to bridge it into this platform, getting all the benefits of it, right? So that was really like, hey, are we wrong here? Are we crazy? Are we high on our own supply here that this doesn't make any sense, that we're going to go make this into the future where it's going? But then the more feedback we got, like, oh yeah, that's really smart. And then when the 510 adapter came out, like, oh man, that's really smart because you're making the friction way less. It's like, shit, I still have this 5. I'm going to walk around with all these devices, right? And you also have some of these brands or even some of these house of brands or MSOs that might have multiple brands. Well, now it's like, I got it all in one. I got 17 different vendors for all-in-ones. How does that make a lot of sense, right? Like supply chains consistency, like product consistency, troubleshooting. There's just ordering. There's just so much more issues that comes through that. Whereas with singular, pun intended and not, is that like it is a singular platform that allows it to consolidate SKUs, right? To have better speed of replenishment, have continuity on your brand designs, have continuity around like your brand collaborations, right? Having the ability to know that your engine or your oil type is going to work the way that it's intended for the consumer. And at the end of the day, the best value for the consumer is there's going to be a way to engage now with the brands so that they have better replenishment, ease of use, better performance, and cheaper and be able to buy things for cheaper. Like in the long run, for us, it's like all these net wins. And so that when it checked all those boxes, then it was like this huge ideation of like, we have this huge idea. We have this big storyboard. This is what we're going to do. How are we going to do it? How are we going to build the patent portfolio around it? How is that all going to work? How are we going to protect it? And how are all these things, because of all the past, I would say just like kind of little trip ups that we've tripped over ourselves, right? And so learning about all those things has helped prepare us on all these different angles so that we could be the most reliable and value added to our customers. Ultimately, at the end of the day, that is our job so that the consumer gets the best experience possible at the best value possible. And so like, if we felt like this is going to happen, this is the way to do it, then man, we need to full force figure out all the ways to make this platform happen. And I'm proud to say that again, that like it's a momentous moment for all of us because we feel like if we do this right, we execute this properly. We just see that for the next 3-5 years, this is the future of vape. We don't see where else it could potentially go because we also know how much more we can iterate off the foundational platform we've built. And on top of that, all the stuff that we believe is the holy grail as cannabis users is like, that's where we're trying to get to, right? Of being able to have the control over the extract, whatever form it takes, so that it can be delivered in the way that it's intended.
just thinking back to what you said, like the opening up of the possibilities is just so massive for so many people now to iterate off and to create these other elements. And then the other point that I didn't realize initially was for these big scale MSOs having all these different vendors and all these different products to use, how complicated and how noisy that is, and how when a consumer buys a product, this works for this, it's just way too much. And now having this one platform where it all works together is so nice and easy, where they have that ability to feel comfortable making those decisions. It works with this. It also works with this.
Yeah, like it should be a huge SKU reduction for a lot of the of companies, right? But again, you're not sacrificing anything though. That's if anything, you're gaining,
100%.
right? That's kind of the whole part of it, and that's the part I think we're really excited about, right? Is that like it's just again, it's got to be the right idea at the right time, and you hadn't seen other manufacturers make different form factors, make different ways, or shoot alone engines, capacity sizes, right? Like the fact we gotta, so from engines perspective, right? We have the stainless one, right? That's the metal pod, right? You have the ceramic one, we call our pro pod, right? And then we have the postless pod, which we call our air pod, right? And so we might get flack for that one, but in general, we'll see.
I wonder who's good.
in real time, I want you to catch that.
We'll see how that one goes. But in general, those will all that technology. So that's the SMT technology, right? Surface mounted technology. That it's postless. It's directly on the heating element, and there's different composites that you could use for that, right? So that has to really understand your heating elements, how the oil is saturating, all those things, right? So there's a lot more tech that kind of goes into that. But again, it's important because in the past, if you're just tuning that to one battery type that's going in from an all-in-one and it's single use, like how much are you going to invest in that, right? You could put all this R&D and tech into it, but then like the shit, they're going to throw it away, And so like that was a pain point for us too, is that like we know obviously how many of these devices we put in the market. And so it was this race of like, how do we get into something more sustainable? It is such an important part. And like the fact that battery now, it's not just only for that pod or our singular systems, right? Or any brand partner that's on it. You could put a 510 on it. That's to us was so important because it has all the things that you need for sustainability, at least in our space, right? It solves that issue. Future of it, right? You can put dosing into it, right? There's so many things that you could do with it, right? Because it's a smarter battery. It's not a quote unquote dumb battery, if you will.
How does the iterative process take where like that first design comes out, you test it, you give feedback, you test it again? Take us behind the curtains, like how complicated that and how many times are you kind of testing to make sure that it's perfect because it works with all these different elements? Because that is a challenge, right? It could work really well with one, but not great with the other, and you want it to work perfect with all.
Yeah, I think we're graced with having a lot of track record with all, at least obviously stainless and ceramic engines, right? Those are something that we're probably one of the largest procurements when it comes to all ceramics and the formulation that we utilize. And also understanding kind of the heating elements, what's the word for it? I know our product team is going to shoot me for this if I don't say it right when it comes to that, but it has to do with kind of the thermal capacity, right? Basically everything that happens with, the resaturation rate and how with the heating elasticity, if you will, that happens with those type of components. And because we had a lot of that knowledge already, it was just making sure that we're putting those major engines into something that's going to work at different capacity sizes. And then the iterative part is like, how do you make designs that work all together, right? I think that was one of the hardest things for the design team, and it continually is, right? When you think about all the library of designs that we have, it's like, how do you get them all to work, right? How do you get them all to work right, look right, and then have the same type of troubleshooting things that we go through? Because at the end of the day, it's hardware, right? You're going to run into some issues, and that's one of the greatest calling cards of Active as it is our ability to not only service those issues, but to be able to walk through. It's like, hey, was this a fulfillment error? Was this something that is actually a hardware error? Was this a formulation error? Was this like, this? And I'm not saying error as in just someone at fault, as in sense, all right, let's solve it, right? Like that's where we get excited because that iterative process for us only improves every single time that we're making a build and single time that we're iterating V1, V2, V3, V4, right? And so for us, I think the process has been exhaustive. To answer the question, right? It's making sure that we're going to always continually improve. Whatever you see from us, whatever you see in the market, anything that's been happening with our that's like the worst version of what we have. That's always like how we look at, which is kind of, almost like double negative, right? Because it's the standard that we try to have and hold up to it. But that just means that that's the amount of testing that we're doing so that it's just only improving and constantly improving. Like we might not always be first to the party on certain stuff, but when we want to come correct. And that's a really, really important part for us because that's, I think, our client partners and then customers that have gotten to know us at all. It really is like, that's one of the things I think we take pride in because we have to be genuine about that. I don't think that at least I can't personally, I can't go out there and not be authentic about something if it's not something that we believe in and we put the rigorous hours into something. And if it's something that's not up to stuff, it's going to be improving. Try this, right? And so I think that's part of our ethos of constant improvement. And that's why we're so excited about the future of where this thing can go. The fact that our baseline is where it's at is we're finally comfortable to launch this. I mean, we're talking about launching this last year at MJ, right? We're like, no, let's wait, And so I think we've made some decisions in the past that maybe like we'll show something a little too early. This was a lot more methodical around like, hey, when we go, we got to be ready and we got to be on version 3, 4, and 5 while version 1 is going out, right? And that's, when I call version 1, that's really like version like 15, but like in general, like that's why I'm always excited about, I got to hold my tongue because I know what's in front of us like next. And it's like, oh, this is even cooler, right? This is even better. And this is kind of the stair-step process. Even when I spoke to you guys last, I hated something's come. That's what this was. And then when I'm talking to you now, you'll see the next thing that's coming behind it. And so those are the things that we're really excited about. Because again, we think that it adds value not only to our clients, but to consumers, right? And that's the part that's really exciting as we elevate the space, bring it forward, give more access to the excellent extractors and oil formulators and makers around the world.
What's your favorite setup on the platform?
Ooh, that's a good one. It depends on the device. I can't show the ones that I like.
It's just the three of us.
Because the one that I like, I'll show you Q1 of next year.
Tune in.
When you see me in wherever we're hanging out, I'll have it in my pocket.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
But I think what you said about the product is most important. I think if you don't understand what you just said, you've probably never created a product before because it is so difficult to release a product. And once you do, you see it all for all the faults and you want to keep iterating because you recognize how great it can become.
Oh, yeah.
And once people start understanding that, they're like, well, listen, we've changed 1,000 more things because we've seen the feedback loop. We recognize how small these changes are. And that's the beautiful and also the complicated give and take with the product.
For sure. Yeah, no, for sure. That's a really good point because look, clients, like at the end of the day, purchasing managers or extraction teams or finance folks, right? Like their superpowers are great in certain areas, but when they're asking for a change as a customer, they're asking for a change, right? And so for us, we've fielded so many of those. Like, hey, if we do this change, we have to educate. Like, oh, well, then we have to change the entire architecture. There's 12 different molds that have to go. Like, there's so much of a process. Like, actually, no, that's a change that we can make within what we've already built. So anytime we're building, so we're always thinking about the iterative changes that could happen. And that only happens, to your point, Brian and Kellen, because we kind of know what changes someone may ask for. Like an airflow from you might be very different than somebody else, right? So like that's one of the hardest things, right? Is like, oh, I want to just go right away. It was like, well, some people don't want that, you know what I mean? And so it's just like, I want it to have more air because I want it to be more e-ciggy, or I want to hit like there's just, it's personal preference at times. And then when you tell one it's great and the other one's like, oh, it's not as good as this way. So it's being able to understand how you can kind of have the bands and then be able to float within those bands, right? And I think from a product development process, I don't think people really understand like how long it actually takes to do it. And I'm the biggest, violator of this, I would say, on our team side. I'm like, all right, guys, yesterday, you know what I mean? Let's bring the sauce person too to like, that's going to take like 18 months. I'm like, what? I'm like, no, 3 months. We could do it in 3 months, And so there's a lot, normal product development cycles are 18 to 24 months. Patent cycles, 2 to 3 years, right? So like, there's a lot that kind of goes into it, and we have to be very thoughtful about that. Obviously, from if anyone's paid attention to this space and kind of what's happened with some of our friendly competitors, those are some of the things that you gotta be aware of, right? And so you gotta check those boxes. You gotta do a hell of a lot of testing, a lot of R&D. You gotta work with partners, and then you gotta validate, and then you gotta go out and execute. At the end of the day, I would say that like one of the things that we're excited about is that when we get to execution phase, right? All the planning stuff and testing stuff is the hard part, in my opinion.
Is there one specific element that you think might go unnoticed by, let's call it the majority of the people, but internally you're thinking like, this is the coolest element that I think is currently underappreciated, but maybe 6 weeks, 12 weeks from now, people are like, oh, that's sick. I can't believe they're doing that.
I think we've gotten some of that feedback already. I think that we just thought it was just a great add-on idea of the 510 adapter, but I think that that's going to be a big one. I think that people... Because normally when you go get a pod system, right, what happens? You're like, oh, I can only go buy those. That's not true anymore. Like that's a huge benefit, right? Like that to me, it's like that will literally release that friction point. So I think we're starting to already kind of hear that. I think that's cool. And the thing I think is really cool is the one thing I really want to talk about, but I'm holding my tongue on, right? Because that is, to me, I think a game changer. Right. And it's a game changer in the sense that because we just come from the space. And like for me, that's what I would want. And I know, Kellen, if you're still rocking behind the machine, you would want the same thing. And so I'm excited about that, right? I think that those two elements, it's kind of the bookends. And then the future, what all the layers of the technology do, I'm going to lay breadcrumbs, right? Is that all the layers of the technology that we're doing from the battery side to the thing I just kind of ominously talked about is coming, is all the foundational pieces of where we're trying to actually go. And I think that to us is like, if you could actually execute that properly, and I know I'm not saying much, but like that's the part that I get excited about. Because I see all the R&D, I know all the iterative parts like that we're in right now with it. And like that's what has me truly excited, because I feel like once these pieces are executed and we have the right partners across commercializing the platform, I think that'll be the choice that clients will have is like, what platform am I going to be on? And I think that we wanted to make it frictionless as possible to be on this platform while also providing the exclusivity around your form factors and your design and your brand ethos within that platform, right? So it's kind of like how is it different than an all-in-one, right? You could still go get that off the shelf all-in-one somewhere else, but they have what's so proprietary about that technology? It's not, right? At the end of the day. And so from a design side, that's important, and how you actually execute on the performance of it matters, obviously, and the consistency of the product. So I think that this is going to solve all of those angles. Yeah, while also saying, hey, 510, you're still invited to the party, man. You're not closing the door to them,
I love it. So we should leave it there. Alex, for our listeners, they want to get in touch, they want to try Singular, where can they find you?
Active710.com and /Singular. I think you'll see it all over our IG, AVD710. And I think you guys will start seeing this across different brand partners and whatnot, but just look up Active Singular. You'll see it.
Thanks for taking the time. This was
all the cool
fun.
stuff that's continuing to come. Appreciate you guys.
Thanks for your time.